if you look at profitability of Apple, it's much higher than its competition. It's also a mixture between a luxury or a premium player and a tech player, and a bit difficult for investors to sometimes wrap their head around that.
I want to ask you more about the AI, because this strategy here has been very central to enormous valuations that's been attached to a lot of companies, and in particular around the Magnificent Seven. What we now know is that there's a developer conference coming up, and that's in June. Is it just a matter of timing here, that we're waiting it out for more news flow, that Apple will produce something and we may get a reaction when that AI news strategy hits? Or is this just a selling opportunity, that there's a little bit of appetite thanks to the share buybacks and dividends? And if you're a betting person at this stage, you take some bets off the table.
Apple's certainly a bit slower in the AI play than the rest of the seven. But Apple has always been a bit late to the game with a lot of developments, but it's always then come out with something that might be a bit more groundbreaking than the rest of the industry. And I don't think you'll hear much about it until later in the year. I think Apple's been very clear that it's still working on things, and we're not going to hear anything in the next few weeks. I think on the developer conference, you probably hear more about a new iPad, which we haven't had any developments here, I think, since 2022. And sales have dropped quite a bit on that particular device. Now, AI, I wouldn't hold my breath for that in the short term, but probably something at the end of the year, and maybe something really interesting, probably in a collaboration with others.
Manfred, fascinating conversation you've already had. You've raised some very interesting points about why it is very different. You know, it's a luxury player, but also compared with many tech companies, the amount of buyback is quite staggering. And I'll almost take the opposite side of my wonderful colleague here. How on earth can anyone sell a stock when you've got a buyer in town picking up $110 billion of it as well? It's difficult to be a seller with that kind of force against them, isn't it?
It's a very interesting question. But I think, yes, you're right on that front. I do hear your argument. I would look much more about how Apple has built this kind of power wall and the ecosystem it has created. And we haven't talked about the services business at all, but the strong growth in the services business, this unique view of Apple of how it places itself in their customers' lives on a much bigger basis, which is a long-term game. Once Apple has managed to make a place in your life, it's very difficult to remove Apple from your life. And I think if you're an investor on a long-term scale, it's definitely a great stock to buy into.
Yeah, and I think that's very interesting. This is a company that believes it's around for the long term. They all do, but some of them aren't going to make it. And with that in mind, Vision Pro is a great case in point. I had a guest yesterday who said it almost doesn't matter how many Vision Pros they sell now. The learning process for Apple is going to be quite extraordinary for better and more widespread products to come later. Do you agree with that, or do you disagree, sir?
It's interesting how little Tim Cook said about Apple Vision Pro. And generally, if it had sold more than they expected, you would have probably heard about it. So I'm assuming sales are a bit slower, and I think we've seen signs in different places that might be the case. It is, of course, a very unusual product with a very high price tag. And as you said, I think Apple is trying a new world here, and it might not have found the audience for that yet, but Apple has in the past created these worlds. Think back of an iPod and the first iPhone when it came out. But it remains to be seen how ready the world is for this new world that Apple is creating. But let's see. We'll see over the 6 months to a year.